Discover 10 spine-chilling encounters with sinister feral people in the haunted Blue Ridge. Sarah and Jake poured their dreams into a dilapidated cottage in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains, peaceful, cozy, and full of potential, or so they thought. Their excitement fizzled as they learned of the Feral Clan, a group of wild, feral people who lurked in the shadows, preying on unwary families. Legends whispered of people vanishing, never to be seen again. It felt like a bad horror movie, yet here they were, living right at the edge of that nightmare. Their first night, stars glittered above, obscured by a whisper of fog that rolled around the trees. Together they settled in, the howls of coyotes echoing softly in the distance. But that peace was fleeting. Sarah noticed odd glances from coiled neighbors, and when she ventured out, the laughter of children echoed and then abruptly silenced, as if a switch had been flicked. A chill skated down her spine. Jake shrugged it off, laughing at her overactive imagination. But soon, unease took root. Later, Jake hurried out for supplies and returned a different man, pale, shaken, eyes wide. He had stumbled into the woods, catching sight of a twisted figure darting among the trees. "I barely got away," he gasped, his once confident voice gone. "It felt like it was chasing me." "What was it?" Sarah squeezed his hands, her heart racing. Jake couldn't say for sure, only that it was otherworldly. The couple decided to push the tales aside, dismissing them as rustic exaggeration. Weeks passed in a blurry cycle of home renovations and gardening. But every glance from the neighbors held hidden knowledge, every whispered conversation felt charged with veiled warnings. Dark woods edged the breathtaking vistas, and chilling words like offerings hung in the air, festering fears. The shadows crept in closer every day. One evening they returned from town, laughter bubbling between them, but their mood shifted. The sheriff's eyes glinted too much, his smile too thin when they pressed about the legends. "Just stories," he said, brushing his hand through the air like he was swatting flies. Yet the uneasiness lingered, and a knot tightened in Sarah's stomach as they drove home. Whispers rose from the woods, echoes of what could only be danger. Flickering shadows drifted beyond the trees. Then the woods were suffocating, wrapping around the car like a predator closing in on its prey. Sarah's thoughts spiraled. Had they truly evoked something sinister? Were they to pay a price for this peaceful life? A gasp caught in her throat when she unearthed a crumpled photograph in the attic, her ancestors, wrapped in bygone days, among them familiar faces, terrifying truths linking them to the very folklore they dismissed. As a disturbingly familiar howl echoed from the night, her grip tightened around the image. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." They ran with urgency through pathways that once felt nurturing. The shadows shifted, and with each footfall, they entered a world where whispers turned into shouts. The trees loomed larger, the moon sinking rapidly, drowning the road in eerie darkness. What if the neighbors hid more than just tales? What if they were somehow a part of this horrific legacy? Everything felt imminent, as raw and open as the woods calling for their souls. They weren't just newcomers anymore, they were entangled in the spine-crawling horror of a lineage they had yet to uncover. And as they turned to trace their way back home, the breath of unseen eyes pierced their hearts, sending a jolting realization something was watching. As the night deepened, so did the foreboding whispers of the Feral Clan. Could they truly escape this web of shadows? Would dawn bring relief, or would they find that the worst was yet to come? The fabric of their lives unraveled, and with each heartbeat, the pull of the wilderness loomed ever closer. The woods felt alive, breathing in sync with their panic. Shadows flickered just beyond the dim light of their porch, mocking them. Sarah shivered and pulled Jake closer, her eyes darting as they searched for the source of that haunting howl. The sound seemed to crawl through the air, wrapping around them like a serpent, squeezing tighter with every heartbeat. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. A knot formed in her stomach, an instinctive dread clawing at her senses. Jake nodded, his jaw clenched, each breath labored as if it was a struggle against an unseen weight. The photograph lay heavy in her pocket, a shroud of their ancestry, tethering them to mysteries better left untold. They hadn't just bought a cottage, they'd inherited a legacy intertwined with darkness. Thoughts spiraled in Sarah's mind. Were those faces in the photograph the same as the feral figures Jake had seen? Were they somehow calling to her, chaining her soul to this haunted land? They moved inside, slamming the door shut as if it could keep the horrors at bay. The faint tick of the old clock filled the silence steady, unyielding, while outside the night crouched like a predator. The air grew stagnant, thick with the scent of damp earth and something sweeter, rot perhaps, a smell that sent bile rising in her throat. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the back of the house. They both jumped, adrenaline flooding their veins. Jake grabbed a flashlight while Sarah snatched a rusted iron fire poker from the corner. They sealed themselves in a tense bubble, hearts pounding wildly against their ribcages. Jake's hands shook as he inched toward the noise. "Stay close," he whispered, each word shaky and strained. Sarah's mind raced with memories, tales of intruders lurking just beyond sight. She could almost feel the weight of eyes watching from the dark corners of the house. They crept toward the back door, shadows warping in the dim light. With a swift motion, Jake swung the door open. The flashlight beam pierced the murky darkness. Empty. But the forest loomed, eager fingertips curling into the boarded windows, whispering tales of loss, a warning, or perhaps a summons. Then, without warning, a blood-curdling shriek sliced through the night, echoing like death itself. It was closer this time, resonating in the pit of Sarah's stomach. Panic surged through her veins, but morbid curiosity pulled her to the door. "Don't!" Jake hissed just as she stepped closer. But it was too late. The flashlight beam caught a glimpse of movement, a fleeting shadow dancing just at the edge of the clearing. She squinted into the darkness, straining to see, to understand, to make sense of it all. "Did you see that?" She breathed, hypnotized by the flicker. It felt wrong yet familiar, the silhouette etching itself into her memory, whispering her name. And then she recognized it, the unkempt hair, the hunched form, the hollow eyes reflecting the light back at her. The feral person from her nightmares. Before she could process the terror, a chorus of growls erupted behind them. They were surrounded. Shadows converged, swarming like angry hornets. Jake tugged her back into the house, but the door slammed shut on its own, sealing them inside. "A trap," Jake gasped, eyes wide with horror. "We need to get out now." They turned to find the windows rattling beneath unseen hands, the ancient timbers of the house groaning in fear. From the darkness, whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, chanting incomprehensible phrases that rang like bells in Sarah's ears. Your blood," echoed around them, slithering into their thoughts, beckoning them into the depths of forgotten horrors. What did they have to give to appease those voices? What were they truly part of? As the chanting grew louder, the walls trembled with an energy that threatened to consume them both, and in that moment, Sarah realized the answer was more horrifying than she could have imagined. The truth about her lineage, the curse of her ancestors, was sealing their fate. They were not mere visitors. They were offerings, set to fulfill a grotesque ritual that called her blood home. But Sarah wouldn't go quietly. With a fierce resolve, she would uncover the mystery and confront the nightmares that lay waiting. In the struggling darkness, her determination ignited, as Jake squeezed her hand. "We fight!" he shouted. But would their courage be enough against the feral clan's insatiable hunger? What would they have to sacrifice to reclaim their lives? Little did they know, the true terror was just taking form, waiting to reveal its twisted nature. The air thickened, pulsating with shadows that danced menacingly along the wooden walls. An unnatural energy crackled and sparked, igniting their nerves like a simmering flame. Jake's flashlight flickered, its weak beam barely piercing the dark veil that enveloped them, and the walls began to thrum with that sinister chant. Your blood, it echoed while the shadows twisted, growing sharper, forming grotesque shapes that clawed at the edges of their vision, a siding, an arm, a face. Panic bubbled up within Sarah, displacing her resolve. Survival surged ahead of her determination. Where do we go? She breathed, her voice barely a whisper, choked by fear. The corners of the room seemed to darken, the very wood of the walls appearing alive, pulsating with the screams of their ancestors or perhaps the forgotten cries of sacrifices past. There's gotta be another way out, Jake muttered, pulling Sarah closer. His heart hammered in his chest, matching the frantic tempo of Sarah's thoughts. They couldn't stay here. Not another minute. They dashed for the kitchen, where the light flickered around them like a dying star. Jake pushed open the door to the basement, the musty air rising up to greet them like a ghost inviting them to a dance. A rickety staircase spiraled down, disappearing into a black abyss. Do we really want to go down there? Sarah hesitated, mind racing with visions of what could lurk below. We don't have a choice, he insisted. We have to hide. Regroup. With a trembling hand, he gripped the banister and started his descent. Sarah followed, each step echoing off the damp stone as if 1,000 footsteps had been taken before theirs. The chill in the air intensified, it even cut through the sweat on Sarah's brow. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but the chaos above left them with little choice. At the bottom, darkness enveloped them. For a moment, all they heard was the rush of their breathing, the silence all-consuming. Grabbing the flashlight, Jake directed its beam across the tiny space, revealing an old furnace and shelves lined with jars filled with murky liquids. But fear pooled deep as their surroundings shifted, darkness wrapped around them like a cold blanket, urging them to surrender. What were those things? Jake whispered, still wide-eyed. Feral, I think, Sarah replied, her voice trembling. Those shadows, they felt wrong. Jake turned sharply, and suddenly his flashlight beam hit something at the far edge of the room, a figure hunched beneath the stairs. It was cloaked in rags, dirt clinging to its matted hair, eyes glinting like shards of glass. Who are you? Jake backed away, voice sharp, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it reached a gnarled finger toward them, trembling with purpose, mouthing words Sarah couldn't hear. Don't get too close, Sarah warned, clutching the fire poker tighter, heart racing, heartbeat echoing in her ears. It doesn't look safe. The figure tilted its head, and the faint whispers returned, louder, drawing closer again. Your blood. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. Something heavy moved through the house above, footsteps resonating like thunder. The whispers intensified, merging into a deafening chorus. Realization struck Sarah. This wasn't just a hideout, it was a breeding ground, a sanctuary for the clan. We need to get out of here. Their eyes darted toward the stairs, but before they could retreat, the figure lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's arm with surprising strength. Join us. It rasped, breath foul and rancid. She gasped, and outrage surged within her. We aren't like you. She cried, struggling to escape. In that moment of chaos, the ceiling above shuddered, and then silence fell. Jake yanked at Sarah's arm, pulling her away just as the whispers subsided, leaving only a heavy, foreboding quiet. What was that? He asked, breath hitching. Sarah could only shake her head, heart pounding, unable to articulate the horror unfolding around them. That silence felt like a warning, a trap set for the unwary. But in the depths of her mind, a terrible thought bloomed. They were tangled in something sinister. Whatever that thing was, it knew her bloodline, knew her name. And as they looked back at the figure lurking in the shadows, she realized they had not just come to a house, they had entered a nightmare that would stop at nothing to reclaim them. Would they find a way to escape before becoming part of that blood-soaked legacy? The whispers returned, louder now, curling around them like an embrace. Your blood, your blood. The dark promise lingered in the air, mere breaths away from them. The house trembled again. What came next would either free them or seal their fates. The instant the grip of the figure released her, Sarah staggered backward, a breathless gasp escaping her lips. Jake's hand shot out to steady her as the shadows churned around them, thickening like a storm. The whispers faded into an anxious rustling, but the weight of eyes she could feel it crawling along her skin. Let us go. Jake urged, yanking her toward the creeping darkness of the basement stairs. The pulse of dread grew louder, synchronizing with the frantic thud of their hearts. Sarah's mind raced as they ascended, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping through their fingers like sand. The house wanted them, craved them. The shadows shifted above, churning like clouds in a thunderstorm. As they emerged into the kitchen, the oppressive sense of foreboding clawed at the edges of their minds. Jake flicked the flashlight toward the door, illuminating the eerie wooden frame, the faint outline of a shadow lurking behind. Right or left? He asked, voice low and tense. Left, to the front door, Sarah replied, though doubt crept in. Can we actually get out? The house shuddered again, a visceral groan that sent vibrations through the floor. What if it's locked? She mused, barely containing the panic surging again within her. There's no time to think about that, run. Jake yelled. They darted left, but the air grew heavier, thick with the stench of decay and something worse, something otherworldly. Suddenly, the floor creaked beneath them, and an unnatural wail spilled forth from the walls, a collective cry of the damned. Jake! Sarah screamed as she stumbled, nearly falling as the floorboards distorted and twisted. The air thickened, constricting her lungs like a vice. I want to let go. Jake shouted, pulling her to her feet, his eyes wild with desperation. The shadows reached for them, stretching as if alive, clawing at their heels. They barreled toward the front door, breath coming in sharp gasps. The door loomed ahead, but it felt impossibly far. Shadows surged around them, merging into a dark wave that seemed to pulse with malice. They were being hunted. The door handle rattled violently as if something on the other side was aware of their plight. Open it. Sarah urged, dread pooling in her gut. Jake fumbled with the handle, panic flooding his features. Don't look back. He ordered, surging against the door as it fought him, resisting their escape with a stubborn will. Your blood, the voices returned, louder, desperate. The figure from the basement lingered in her mind. Did it follow them? Would it drag them back? With a final heave, Jake forced the door open, but instead of the relief of fresh air, a roiling fog crept inside, mingling with the shadows. No! Sarah cried, tugging at his shirt, but it was too late. The fog swallowed them whole, wrapping around their bodies like serpents, pulling them deeper into the dark labyrinth of the house. Suddenly, the pressure released, and the fog dissipated just enough for them to see a warped, twisted hallway stretched out before them. Distorted portraits lined the walls, their once familiar faces now savage, twisted grins of anguish. This isn't right, this feels wrong, Jake whispered, scanning the flickering light above, which buzzed and flickered like a dying firefly. Maybe it's leading us somewhere, Sarah said, her voice trembling, heart racing. Yet, a gnawing unease settled within her. They weren't just in a house anymore, they were in something alive. Alive and breathing. Another echo reverberated through the air, the laughter of the shadows dancing at the edge of vision, teasing them, beckoning. Which way now? Jake asked, his grip tightening around Sarah's hand. Down, she said, instinctively pointing into the choking darkness. As they moved deeper into the shadowy hallway, each step felt heavier, each breath trailing behind them like a burden. A chilling draft slithered past, whispering secrets, old and dark. They were not alone. Something stirred ahead, a glimmer of movement that sent adrenaline surging through their veins. Shadows flitted across the walls, dodging the flashlight beam, shapes forming and reforming. And as they stepped cautiously into the deeper shadows, a whisper cut sharply through the quiet. "Your blood will feed us." A frenzied rush of horror coursed through Sarah. They weren't simply dealing with mere shadows. Whatever haunted this twisted space craved them. Could they outrun a legacy that thrived on their fear? As the essence of dread thickened, the all-consuming thought loomed: what was the true cost of their blood? What they didn't know was that the dark had secrets of its own, and it was all waiting to be unleashed at the moment they least expected. As they crept further down the warped hallway, Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. Each footfall echoed back like a taunt, a derisive laughter swirling around them. Shadows flickered and whispered, gesturing like ghostly fingers hidden just out of sight. "Jake, stay close," she urged, pulling him instinctively toward her. "It feels like they're watching us." He nodded, his eyes darting nervously, but the cold creep of dread seeped through his bravado. "Just keep moving. We can't let them catch us." Suddenly, a doorway loomed to their right, slightly ajar, beckoning them with an eerie promise of escape. But as they approached, a gust of wind slammed the door open, revealing a room draped in heavy darkness. "It's just a room," Jake whispered, eyes wide as fear pooled in his gaze. "Maybe we should check it out." Sarah shook her head. "We don't know what's in there. We should keep going." But curiosity tugged at them, pulling them closer. Peering inside, they were met with a sight that would haunt their dreams. The room was filled with makeshift altars, each one adorned with photographs of people: missing persons, lost souls. Candles flickered in unnatural patterns, casting unsettling shadows that danced like specters upon the walls. "Jake, this isn't right," Sarah gasped, stepping back as the air thickened with an invisible tension. "We have to get out of here." Just then, a low, guttural growl rumbled from the depths of the room, freezing them in their tracks. A figure emerged from the darkness, crawling on all fours, gaunt, wild-eyed, and brimming with malice. Its skin was pallid, stretched too tight like a drum over brittle bones. "Your blood will feed us," it rasped, voice grating like nails on a chalkboard. Panic burst in Sarah's chest, and she grabbed Jake's arm fiercely. "Run!" she screamed, turning on her heels. The two bolted down the hall, the growling figure hot on their heels, each step rippling with malevolence. Ahead, they saw another doorway, this one glowing faintly as if welcoming them back into the light. "There!" Jake shouted, pointing. They raced toward it, feeling the floor beneath them pulse like a living heartbeat, the shadows clawing at their backs. As they reached the doorway, it swung open before them, revealing a staircase spiraling downward. "We have to go down," Jake urged, plunging into the darkness below. Each step felt like a descent into hell. The air grew colder, and the shadows coiled tighter around them, whispering frantic warnings. What if we're just leading them to another part of the house? Sarah's voice trembled as panic clawed at her throat. What if there's no escape? But Jake pressed on. "We can't stop. We'll find a way out, we have to." His determination kindled a flicker of hope, even as they plunged deeper into the bowels of despair. The bottom of the stairs opened into a cavernous space, walls lined with mirrors that warped their reflections into grotesque versions. They looked like a pair of terrified strangers, lost in a nightmare. Just as they took a moment to catch their breath, a shriek echoed through the mirrors, a scream that shattered the silence and sent icy tendrils of fear spiraling through them. The figure from the room bounded into view, its eyes glowing with a ravenous hunger. "Your blood!" it shrieked, lunging toward them, teeth glinting in the dim light. Jake shoved Sarah back, his own body a shield, yet the figure halted before them, drawn to something deeper reflected in the mirror behind them. Their eyes locked onto a swirling dark mass, a vortex that seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. "What is that?" Sarah breathed, dread settling in her stomach like a stone. "I don't know, but it looks alive." Jake said, uncertain. As the figure reared back, caught momentarily between them and the abyss, another voice crackled to life. This one was smoother, laced with temptation. Join us, become one with the darkness. Sarah felt the pull of shadows beckoning her. They were alive, breathing, yearning for connection. The urge to flee clashed against an insatiable curiosity. Jake, she whispered, lost in the pull of the darkness, her mind a whirlwind. Sarah, no. Jake shouted, his voice slicing through the haze. We have to leave now. But as the shadows surged forward, a primal fear gripped her, churning her insides with a warning she couldn't ignore. They were running out of time. Would they escape? Or step closer to the very fate the shadows craved? As the figure lunged once more, Sarah realized the true nature of their torment. It was rooted in their own fears, feeding off the terror that thrummed in their veins. The echoes of their hearts synchronized with the whispers reverberating through the air. What happened next would determine if they could turn their fear into a weapon or if they would become merely echoes themselves. The creature lunged, teeth glinting menacingly, but Sarah shook off the darkness, breaking free from its hold. We have to move. She yelled, grabbing Jake's arm and yanking him toward the nearest mirror. Without thinking, they dashed to the warped glass, the hungry presence snapping at their heels. It felt as if time stretched, the air seemed to thicken around them, drenching them in a sweet, suffocating fear. They reached the mirror and slammed their palms against it, hoping to find an escape. Instead, the surface rippled like water, distorting their reflections. Find anything? Jake shouted, wild-eyed, glancing back as the creature stalked closer, its growls echoing off the walls, reverberating in their very bones. No. Unless you count nightmares as a way out. But they didn't have time. With a surge of adrenaline, Jake pressed his palm against the surface harder, and suddenly, the glass around them shimmered, swirling like a whirlpool. This is crazy. Sarah screamed. I don't care. I'd rather face whatever's in there than this thing, he replied, voice raw. They threw themselves forward. The mirror swallowed them whole. A moment of disorientation hit as light swirled around, wrapping them in a cocoon of confusion. Then, they tumbled into another room, this one just as dark but wholly different. They landed on a cold floor littered with shattered glass, the remnants of countless mirrors like scattered teeth. The air was thick with the acrid scent of decay. They scrambled to their feet, breathless, disoriented. The shadows clung to the corners, whispering secrets that slithered through their minds like worms. What the hell was that? Sarah gasped, glancing back at the mirror, which now merely reflected their horrified faces. Whatever it was, it didn't follow us, Jake said, breaths coming fast, but doubt flickered in his eyes. Yet. As the haze of noise fell around them, they became aware of distant echoes, the soft tapping of nails against wood, a shuffling sound as if someone, or something, was moving just beyond their sight. Do you hear that? Sarah asked, heart racing again. Yeah, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Let us get out of here. But the room was a maze of shadows and gloom, walls seemed to shift, making escape feel impossible. They edged forward cautiously. With each step, the whispering intensified, merging into a cacophony that clawed at their sanity. They were losing time. Losing hope. And then, Jake froze. Look! Before them was another altar, this one surrounded by what looked like candles, but the flames flickered black and deep, giving off a sickly glow. Piled on the altar were trinkets and tokens, keys, rings, and other personal items that had belonged to the missing persons. It felt wrong. Everything in her screamed to turn around. Sarah, Jake said, voice trembling. What if this is all connected? What if they're watching us again? No. We can't think like that. But the words stumbled out of her mouth more as reassurance than a declaration. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, not crawling, standing tall and twisted. It wore what appeared to be a crown of shattered bones, chest heaving with unnatural breaths. Its eyes glowed with the same hunger from before. "Your fears feed me," it rasped, voice drenching the air with ice. Before Sarah could react, it reached toward Jake, its bony fingers stretching hungrily, emotions swirling there that begged him to approach. "Jake, run!" Sarah screamed, urging him away. Yet it was as if he were hypnotized, eyes glazed over as he stepped closer to the beast, allure of power evident in his expression. "Join me," the creature enticed, sounds curling sinisterously around them. Sarah's heart pounded harder, chasing away rational thought. She had to act. "Jake, listen to me," she cried, her voice slicing through the thick pall of despair. "We can't let it consume you." The creature loomed larger, its form becoming a mass of swirling shadows. The room began to spin, panic clawing at Sarah's throat. They had to fight. She felt the darkness closing in, an invisible vice tightening around her chest, almost suffocating. Just as Jake broke free from the creature's thrall, a resounding crash echoed through the air. The mirror behind them shattered, turning the room into a kaleidoscope of chaos. "Run!" They bolted back the way they had come, but the shadows were quickening, the whispers rising into a deafening roar. "Sarah!" Jake hollered as they burst through the door into the next room, but the shadows followed, determined to drag them back into their haunting grasp. As they stumbled into the next available exit, Sarah looked back. The creature melted into the shadows, eyes locked on them with an insatiable hunger, leaving only a chilling promise in the air. "We'll find you again." Their hearts racing, they plunged into deeper darkness, knowing they were merely prolonging the inevitable. In the suffocating dark, another choice awaited, one that could seal their fate or cast them into a trap even worse than the one they'd escaped from. Would they find salvation down that terrifying path, or would they ultimately succumb to the horrors lurking in the veil of shadows? They stumbled through the dark passageway, breathless and hearts pounding. The cluster of shadows grew more substantial around them. The whispers, once faint, crawled into their ears, murmuring secrets they didn't want to hear. Sarah glanced back. The door they'd just burst through flickered dimly before fading entirely. "Which way?" Jake asked, panic flaring in his eyes. I don't know." The corridor twisted unnaturally as if it were alive. Walls warped and changed with every step they took. It felt like the very structure of the place was toying with them, guiding them into a dark abyss. The whispers grew louder, now a chorus of agonizing wails, darting in and out of clarity. "Let's just pick a direction," Jake shouted, voice cracking under the weight of terror. "No. We need to think or we'll end up lost or worse." A horrible thought entered Sarah's mind. What if this place fed off their fear? What if the more terrified they became, the stronger it grew? "Sarah," he breathed suddenly, eyes darting toward an opening at the far end of the hall. "Look, there." A faint light glimmered beyond that opening, shining like a distant beacon in the suffocating gloom. With urgency, they sprinted toward it, hope flickering in their chests. As they neared, the light revealed a grotesque image. A large mirror stood at the center of the room, surrounded by dark tendrils that writhed with a life of their own. The glass shimmered mesmerizingly, but there was no reflection of either of them. Instead, a blankness swallowed their images whole. "This is the same type of mirror," Jake whispered, backing away instinctively. "Do you think it's safe?" Sarah's voice trembled as darkness pulsed around the edges of the room, drawing closer with each heartbeat. "Safe? No. But it might be our only option." "Option for what?" she replied, her breath hitching. "To get eaten." They felt the shadows creeping closer, clawing at them, a soft scraping sound growing louder in the oppressive silence. "We need to break it," Jake declared, moving forward. "Jake, wait." But he wouldn't listen. He swung a fist at the glass as it splintered under the force of his anger. Cracking spiderwebs raced across the surface, sending waves of shimmering light cascading around them. A howl erupted from the shadows, drowning their ears as a rush of cold wind erupted from the mirror. Sarah staggered back, heart racing. A figure, cloaked in darkness, emerged from the fragmented glass. "Fools! You think you can escape?" The creature's voice reverberated, sinister and rich with malice. Its face twisted into a mask of abstract horror, features shifting like the shadows around them. The light from the splintered mirror illuminated a grotesque silhouette, robes billowing with otherworldly grace. "We can't let it in," Sarah shouted, grabbing Jake's arm again. But he remained rooted in place, eyes locked onto the newly materialized figure. "What if it's a way out?" he whispered, temptation shimmering in his gaze. "No. It's a trap." Before she could pull Jake away, the room tilted. Shadows surged like tidal waves, rising up and over the threshold. The creature extended its hand, fingers stretching impossibly long and clawed. The distorted mouth twisted into a smile, revealing a jagged array of teeth. "Join us, become part of the endless," it rasped, longing creeping into its terrible voice. Suddenly, the mirror fragmented further, its pieces floating into the air like stars in a dark void. Each shard reflected twisted versions of themselves, angry glares and desperate faces. "Look at what you could be," the creature taunted, shadows swirling in a hypnotic dance around Jake. "Jake! Fight it!" Sarah screamed, the world around her feeling unstable as though reality itself was at stake. The figure lunged forward suddenly, slashing the air with elongated claws. A piercing scream rushed out of her as she felt the cold energy enveloping her body, pulling her toward the glass. "Jake!" But he stood paralyzed, the allure of darkness pulling his gaze. With a surge of fear, Sarah tore herself away from the creature's grip, lunging toward Jake. Just as she reached him, shadows coiled around them both, pulling them back toward the mirror's gaping maw. "Go!" With a final push, she threw herself and Jake toward the mirror's edge, and everything collapsed around them into a cascade of shimmering glass and darkness. Once again, they were swallowed up by the chaos. As the world warped around them, the very fabric of their existence felt ready to unravel. When they landed this time, they were not alone. In a saturnine forest, moonlight trickled through the thick canopy, illuminating skeletal trees and revealing lurking silhouettes that watched them with hollow eyes. "Where are we?" Jake murmured, shock creeping into his voice. Sarah stepped back, shivers coursing through her. They were not done yet. The shadows had merely shifted, something worse awaited in the woods, drawing near. "Don't look back," she warned, tension climbing once again. But a rustle in the darkness called to them. It was time to decide, would they dare venture deeper into the haunted darkness or flee from the sinister whispers that lured them on? The ground trembled underfoot, and chilling laughter echoed through the trees. Their heartbeats drummed louder, they had only just begun to survive. "Sarah, what's coming?" As silhouettes swirled closer, she couldn't shake the feeling whatever lurked in the forest hungered for them, and they were already running out of time. The trees loomed taller, gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers ready to snatch them into the abyss. Shadows danced in their periphery, a constant reminder that the forest was alive with malevolence. Sarah's mind spun as the rustling grew louder, echoing through the dead air. "Keep moving," she urged, gripping Jake's hand tightly. "Don't let them catch us." But Jake hesitated, pulling back. "What if it's just animals? What if just go?" Panic surged in her voice, driving them forward. They pushed through the underbrush, steps quickening as dread thrummed through the air like an electric current. She dared a glance back, spotting bright eyes gleaming in the darkness, watching, waiting. "What if it's not just animals?" Jake whispered, his voice trembling. The fear in his eyes was raw, palpable. The laughter floated closer, echoing through the trees, a sound so chilling it felt like ice slid down her spine. She could almost feel the lingering breath of unseen creatures wrapping around them. The fading light seemed to pull shadows together, creating shapes that moved unnaturally. Run! Sarah shouted, suddenly sensing a shift. She broke into a sprint, adrenaline fueling her speed. Every nerve sang with alarm as the dark forest closed in around them. They dodged trees, roots snaking up from the ground like restless arms trying to hinder their escape. Then came the first scream, a high-pitched wail that pierced the night, sending ripples of panic through her. It was followed by another, deeper and more guttural. What was that? Jake shouted, skidding to a halt. His face was pale, haunted by the unknown. Just move. Sarah urged again. We can't stop. Branches cracked behind them, loud and deliberate. It was no longer one voice, multiple screams layered together, echoing against the night, full of rage and agony. A sense of desperation surged within her, urging her forward. Suddenly, a figure broke through the trees, a wild shape, matted hair hanging like vines over a face twisted with derangement. The eyes were sunken and gleamed with a manic hunger beneath the moonlight, sparkling like shards of glass. Sarah! Get back! Jake yelled as the figure lunged toward them, hands clawed and filthy, dripping with dark stains that seemed to glisten as if wet. With no time to think, Sarah yanked Jake away and ducked, narrowly avoiding the sharp grasp of the nightmare fueled by madness. The howling laughter grew louder, rhythmic like drums, as a band of these feral shapes appeared behind the first, twisted, unkempt, with hollow stares. We can't fight them. She screamed, raw fear gripping her words. We need to find shelter. They darted to the left, breaching a small clearing, but the shadows from the treetops followed, the cacophony of snarls and ghastly laughter encircled them like predators around their target. Look! Jake gasped, pointing to a decrepit structure half hidden by undergrowth. We can hide in there. With wild legs, they bolted towards the dilapidated building, its windows opaque and its door hanging ajar like a maw, ready to swallow them whole. They dashed through the threshold, the rancid smell of decay hitting them like a wall. Please, Jake gasped, breathing heavily as they pressed against the back wall, eyes darting toward the entrance. The chants of their pursuers pulsed outside, echoes reverberating through the decaying floorboards. We need to be silent, Sarah whispered, every sense heightened. The sounds of the forest mingled with their own ragged breathing, creating a discordant symphony of dread. Then, just as they dared to hope, a slow creaking caught their attention. The door warped under unseen pressure, a dark shadow merging at its edges, pushing it open slowly, almost teasingly. What is happening? Jake's face drained of color as he clutched her arm tighter. The figure they had first encountered stepped into the doorframe, silhouetted by the moonlight. It grinned wide, revealing teeth that glistened like obsidian and dripped with some viscous fluid. The whispers intensified until it became a growling chant, beckoning them forward. Sarah, what are we going to do? Jake breathed in desperation, his eyes wide with terror. The air grew thick with an oppressive energy as the shadows piled in closer outside, eager to consume. Whatever it is, we can't let it get us. Then came the chilling sound of claws raking against the walls, punctuating her resolve. The darkness seeped through the cracks, and a chilling thought struck her. What if the forest wasn't just hunting them? What if they were already part of the hunt? No. We're leaving. Sarah shoved past Jake, bolting toward the door just as it gaped wider. But the forest had sent more. Dozens of glinting eyes stared at them from the darkness as they stood frozen in fear. Run! The command shattered their hesitation as they rushed back into the night, shadows swirling all around. A frenzied chase began again, a daunting feeling growing. The forest always knew where to find them. Would they find escape in this maelstrom of madness, or was it all a twisted game? The whispers called, and the laughter grew louder as they plunged deeper into sinister darkness. Sarah, what lies ahead? Jake gasped, his breath racing again. You won't believe it, she replied, dread curling in her stomach as they pushed forward into the unknown. The laughter chased them, a shared malice, promising that the worst was yet to come. The darkness surged around them like a living thing, curling into every corner of the vast forest, swallowing sound and light. Each step they took felt like a prayer, whispered into the void. They could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching them, hungrily waiting for a moment of weakness. Sarah's heart thudded mercilessly in her chest, each beat a countdown to dread. "We have to keep moving," she urged, dragging Jake through the vile shadows. Her instincts screamed at her to run faster, to escape the invisible grip that felt so close behind them. What if they're already here?" Jake replied, his voice tremulous as the fear wrapped tighter around him. He stumbled, nearly losing his footing on the unforgiving terrain. "Maybe we should stop talking," Sarah shot back, urgency flooding her tone. "They can hear us." The laughter echoed from the depths of the forest, mocking them, curling around their desperation like smoke. It came from every direction, warping the sounds into something sinister. She could barely make sense of it. Was it the rustling of leaves or something more malevolent? Panic accelerated her pace. Suddenly, the ground dropped away beneath their feet, and they fell, tumbling into a narrow pit, the damp earth catching them. Jake landed heavily beside her, his face pressed close to the dirt. Before they could collect themselves, shadowy figures swarmed like a murky pulse above, grazing the rim of the pit. "Do you think they saw us?" he panted, shoulders shaking. A low growl rumbled from above, followed by a chorus of wild howls that made Sarah's skin crawl. The figures seemed to hunch as they leaned over, gripping the earth's edge, and for a moment, their grotesque faces caught the moonlight. Hollow cheeks, vast eyes shimmering with madness, and mouths that twisted into unnatural smiles. "They must know we're down here," Sarah whispered, stealth taking over as they pressed against the cold, hard ground and hugged the walls of their temporary prison. She could feel ice-cold sweat trickling down her back. "Get ready to hold your breath," but there was no time. A limb shot down, a clawed hand reaching, stretching. "Run!" With a burst of adrenaline, Sarah scrambled to her feet, pulling Jake up with her, racing back into the dense thicket. The forest was a maze of confusion, branches clawing at them, the gnarl of roots wrapping around their legs like serpents, threatening to drag them back. "Where do we go?" Jake shouted, terror bleeding into his voice. "Over there." She pointed frantically at a flickering light deep within the trees, the tiniest glimmer of hope cutting through the pitch black. They bolted towards it, more of a shadowy flame than an actual beacon, feeling the ground tremble beneath them as the figures pursued closer, laughter shattering through the night in jagged bursts. Heart racing, Sarah's breath came in labored gasps. "Don't stop," she cried. But as they ran, shadows twisted into warped shapes. The trees appeared to shift, closing in around them. The light faltered, waning like a heartbeat, then vanished. They skidded to a halt, the palpable darkness tightening around them like a vice. The laughter faded, morphing into whispers that wound around them, not jesting, but hollow promises of doom. Jake's voice quaked, fear cementing in his eyes. "What if we're already caught?" The ground quaked again, shaking their resolve. A low voice, barely audible at first, slithered through the air, weaving itself into their minds. "Join us." What are they?" Sarah stammered, body trembling. The shadows leapt closer, and for the first time, she could see their faces twisted, grinning, stained with blood. "Run!" Jake screamed, and for the first time, he lunged ahead, dragging her along. But the whispers sang louder now, entreating them to stop, to give in. "What's that?" A sudden flash of movement passed by her. Something sprang from the bushes, darting back and forth, a glimpse of pale skin, sunken eyes chasing them. With every ounce of strength, they fled deeper into the abyss of trees and darkness, but every path quickly seemed to lead back to the nightmare. Would they find sanctuary or become prey in this horror show? The relentless laughter echoed, promising that this hunt was far from over, and a new fear gripped her heart. "Jake!" she shrieked, peering into the treacherous night ahead. "They're closing in. We need to find a place to hide, now." His eyes were wild. But just ahead was a clearing, a stone structure appearing like a mirage. Crumbling walls beckoned like a sanctuary, but dread curled in her gut. "Is it safe?" Jake whispered, urgency painted on his face. "Only one way to find out," Sarah replied, trembling. As they stepped into the lightless opening, the door creaked ominously, shadows dancing at their heels. Raw terror played in their veins. Was this the safety they sought, or had the forest led them into an even darker trap? "Nothing here, just darkness," Jake murmured, glancing back at the shadows lingering outside. "Do you hear that?" Sarah's voice trembled. There it was, hollow laughter, unmistakable, beckoning them back into the night. "Let us get out of here," he urged, but the door slammed shut behind them, sealing them in. "Sarah, what have we stepped into?" Jake whispered, dread enveloping him. "Something far worse than we can imagine," Sarah replied, eyes wide with fear as they faced the encroaching fog, swirling with ominous whispers. Had this really been the escape they were looking for, or were they only just beginning to understand the true horror of their surroundings? The moment the door slammed shut, the air shifted. A heavy stillness fell over them, as if the shadows themselves paused to breathe. Shadows pooled at the edges of the room, flickering like candle flames, and Jake's pulse quickened. "We need to find a way out," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah turned her attention to the walls, their surfaces slick with moisture. Every crack and crevice seemed to quake with an unseen energy, vibrating with whispers that brushed the edges of her mind like chilling fingers. "What if the forest is just waiting for us?" She wondered aloud, dread curling around her heart. "What if it knows exactly where we are?" A low rumble echoed through the structure, a reminder that the darkness was alive and well. "We can't stay here," Jake insisted, taking a step back toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked." "Great," Sarah replied, gnawing her lip in frustration. "As if this could get any worse." They pressed against the door, straining with all their weight, but it held firm, as if the forest itself conspired against their escape. "We can't just give up," Jake said, fear racing in his eyes. "We have to find another way." "Look." Sarah pointed to a flicker of light seeping from beneath a heavy wooden beam at the far end of the room. A beam imbued with a faint warmth that cut through the frigid air. Could it be a way out? Jake asked, hope mingling with skepticism. "Let us find out." As they approached the source of the light, the whispering grew louder, curling around them like thick smoke, fraying Sarah's nerves. Your blood," echoed in her ears, intensifying with every step. The walls seemed to lean in closer as if the whole place hungered. With a surge of determination, Sarah reached down to pry at the beam, the warmth radiating against her fingers. "Help me," she grunted, feeling the thick wood shift but not yield. But just as the last glimmer of hope sparked alive again, shadows surged from the corners, pooling around her feet like predators ready to attack. "Sarah! Watch out!" Jake yelled as the shadows lunged toward her. They were cold, clammy fingers grasping for her ankles, relentless as they pulled her back toward the dark depths. With a gasp, she yanked her leg free and stumbled sideways. "To the light!" she shouted, and Jake was right there beside her, ducking as the shadows whipped past. They lunged forward, desperate hands grappling with the beam, adrenaline pulsing through their bodies as they tugged with all their strength. As they wrestled, the beam creaked ominously, and the whispers escalated into a shriek, a sound that pierced the silence like a knife. The darkness roared. "Here, help!" Sarah shouted again, and they clasped their hands around the beam, adrenaline exploding through them like a shockwave. With a final thrust, they yanked hard as the beam snapped, revealing a hidden opening, a tunnel, glowing faintly with an otherworldly hue. "Go!" Jake cried, pushing Sarah forward as they dived into the tunnel, fear compelling them to flee deeper. Instinctively, they weaved through the darkness, hearts racing, breaths ragged as the shadowy tendrils clawed behind them, eager to reclaim their prey. The tunnel was tight, damp air biting at their lungs as they crawled. But ahead, flickering light beckoned them on, illuminating the dark with ethereal beams that felt like life itself. "What is it?" Jake gasped, striving to keep his momentum. The whispers faded, replaced by the muffled sound of rushing water. "Is it a way out?" Sarah nodding, her heart pounding when they emerged into a cavern. Moonlight spilled inside, painting ethereal patterns across walls etched with unfamiliar runes. "What's south this place? Looks like it might have been a shrine." Jake ventured, voice barely above a whisper. But they didn't linger in stunned awe. The resonating sound of movement echoed from behind. "Run!" Sarah urged, fear gleaming in her eyes, pulling Jake through the water's edge. The winding path only led deeper into the cavern. They edged along the walls, the shadows stretching long and dragging close. Unshakable panic clawed at her throat. The water murmured words she couldn't quite make out. The walls began to pulse with a translucent glow, guiding them toward an altar at the center of the room, engraved with cryptic language swirling around a magnificent crystal. Its heart seemed to thump like a life source, a heartbeat intertwined with the rhythm of the shadows. "This must be a part of the ritual," Sarah whispered, dread infiltrating her thoughts. "Should we touch it?" Jake hesitated. "What if it's another trap?" In that moment, shadows flickered at the cavern's mouth, swirling in hungry anticipation. "The shadows, they're coming." "We won't let them take us," Sarah whispered fiercely. "We need to break this cycle." With every ounce of courage she could muster, she surged forward, grasping the crystal tightly, and in an eye-blinding moment, an explosion of light erupted around them, a dazzling eruption that pierced through the shadows, clearing their sight. "Now! Focus our fear into the light," Jake urged as the shadows recoiled against the brilliance. Together they poured all their terror, their desperation into the crystal. The echoes of the forest rampaged outside, but inside, they forged strength from their anger for their lives, for each other, for those who had fallen before them. The crystal glowed fiercely, pulsing against their palms, unleashing a wave of energy that surged through the cavern, illuminating every crack and fissure with pure, unyielding light. The shadows shrieked, the chorus of madness choking under the weight of raw power unbound. With a final pulse, the light expanded, bridging the gap between realms, the dark and the light, melding together until in an instant, they were outside. A sharp intake of breath fell from their lips, reinvigorated by moonlight and the scent of clean earth. The forest pulsed around them, shadows retreating, whimpering into obscurity. "We did it," Jake breathed, drawing Sarah onto solid ground just outside the forest's edge, where the nightmares slipped away. Hollow echoes faded, scattered by a new breeze, an echo of hope. But at what cost? Sarah wondered. They both collapsed against a tree, hearts still racing with the thrill of survival. Whatever it was, Jake panted. "We can't go back there. We may have escaped, but that darkness, it felt alive." "It's a part of us now," Sarah agreed, fingers trembling. As they laid against the sturdy tree, the moon dipped beneath the horizon, signaling the dawn, but as the sun rose, neither would forget the lingering shadows of the night. They had faced the darkness, but every light cast its shadow, leaving them to understand one truth: freedom came at a price, and the forest would always remember them. With weary hearts, they walked back towards the light of the morning, shadows whispering behind, yet for this moment, they were finally free. But shadows have a way of following those who dare to confront them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales of survival. You need to subscribe now to make sure you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now. Every click feeds the algorithm and helps us bring you more chilling adventures. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what just happened. And this is important: you must instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support us. True fans understand the importance of standing together in the face of darkness.